Come on in, bestie. Welcome to StoryPod, where we do the doing of story development together. Brought to you by Creative BFF. Hello. I don't know why I like to come in like this, fluttering and things, but it just helps me to know, like, okay, we're starting the video now. Listen, how are you? Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the StoryPod podcast. Sorry, I had to look and make sure I'm recording, girl, because I'm trying to use these key bindings to like be able to. Anyway, it doesn't matter. How are you? Happy New Year. I don't know when you're going to be seeing this, but for me, it's only a few days after the new year. We're at the very beginning of January. I am very glad to have made it into the new year with you, and I hope that you had a wonderful holiday. You might be seeing this in February or March, girl. I don't know when you're seeing this, but very glad to be with you here on the StoryPod podcast. My name is Ashley. I hope that you are doing well. I keep saying that, like, what a weird intro I'm doing right now. A long, weird intro. But anyway, we're going to keep rolling with it. Okay, we're going to keep rolling with it. Before I get started, if you have any story questions that you would be happy and willing for me to answer here on the podcast, please feel free to send them to me. My goal with this podcast, with this channel, is to help you and myself. Listen, this is practice for me too, is for us to think in terms of story and to make our stories better, to be able to maybe be more quick. I mean, I think that this is kind of like good, quick training on coming up with ideas. I feel like, okay, listen, I'll put some like, what are they called? Every time I try to say this, I forget. I will put some timestamps so you can skip this whole little intro part. If you're just listening to this, I'm sorry, we're here together. We're here together unless you want to like fast forward, girl, press that little 30-second button, okay? But I was having a discussion with, a friend slash creative partner of mine, and he was saying how he feels like he only has so many ideas. He gets kind of stuck when it comes to story. He feels like, he's maybe, he didn't say it like this, but I'm going to say it like this, maybe a little bit protective over certain ideas, feeling like I'll never be able to come up. I don't know if I'm going to be able to come up with any more good ideas. And we were having this discussion in the context of working on a story that he came up with. But I told him, number one, don't worry, there's always more story to be told. Okay. But I also told him that I relate to that feeling, early on in my, storytelling life, world, whatever. I definitely was very protective over my story ideas, which I'm not saying I'm not. I obviously wouldn't want someone to come and steal a story idea of mine, but I had this sense of, oh, I really love this idea. This is such a great idea in my mind, in my opinion. And I don't know that I'll ever be able to come up with any other good ideas. I think this is the best idea I've ever had in terms of a story. But now, many, many years later, probably a decade, 2 decades, I don't know, later from that version of Ashley, I realized that that's not a concern of mine anymore. And I think it's just really doing this kind of practice, just doing the practice of coming up with story ideas. And you'll find that there's always more ideas to be had, and they build off of each other. And even if you don't use a particular idea that you came up with, maybe something came from it that is a great idea. So all of that was to say, I really think that part of what has gotten me to this point where ideas flow pretty easily, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I've developed a level of confidence in my ability to come up with ideas, which is why I'm even trying to ply my trade as a story coach, because I generally feel like I can come up with some ideas and help somebody out. That's my goal here. And I think that us doing this together, kind of coming off the top of the dome, as I like to say, with ideas and answering questions and things like that. It's really like putting in reps at the gym. It's really practice. And I think that it will get all of us to a point where we don't have to hold certain ideas so preciously. If something doesn't work for a story, we can let it go. We can put it on the shelf, see if we can find a place for it. And if not, then okay, we'll trust that there will be better ideas coming. Or we'll just trust that this one story that I'm making up is not going to be the magnum opus one-hit wonder of my life. There's always more story. So with all of that said, this is why I do these answering story questions and doing the Storymatic. And hopefully by this point, this is something that you can enjoy. I mean, I'm still trying to feel out how to structure these videos and what would work on YouTube in terms of, making up stories and being a story coach and helping and answering questions and things like that. I think it'll come, but that's the purpose. This is really good training and practice and getting reps in. And it helps me. I'm the only person here right now. Nobody else is on this channel right now as of recording. So it's definitely helping me. And I hope that it helps you as well. Even if this is not a question that's specifically for your story, hopefully the practice of it will help you to work through your own story questions. But like I said, if you have a question, please feel free. I would love to answer it here. You can email me at ash@creativebff.com, or you can go to my website, creativebff.com, and you can drop me a message in the contact section, or you can put a comment wherever you're listening to or watching this. And thank you for bearing with me, because I feel like I'm someone who needs to give a preamble. And also, side note, if you can hear anything going on outside, I have my window open. I need this natural light, girl. Okay. I am a light girly. Even though I say I'm a ninja, I love the light. So please forgive if you can hear anything clattering outside. I'm not going to be closing the windows. It's winter time and we're having a really lovely day. So I want it to stay open. Anyway, girl, listen, I'm a talker. I apologize. Sorry, not sorry. So what we're doing today, if you have been looking through my catalog on this channel at any level, I love answering questions, and that was what this whole intro was about. So what we're going to be doing today in this video is answering another question from Reddit. Like I said, send me your questions. But until then, Reddit is where we go. Okay, so let me read the question here for you. It is from r/writing advice. The poster is Akira Dark Robotics. Would having a character's strength change for an unknown to reader lore question be too inconsistent? One of my characters has, unknown to the reader themselves, unknown to the character themselves, the literal shadows fused into their soul. There are a few little hints. She acts weird. Her pupils vanish occasionally, making her eyes 100% black. She has fully black eyes with purple pupils. And when she gets stressed, she starts speaking in unknown tongues. But one of her main things is that she almost never gets angry unless you do something terrible to her or her friends. But when she gets angry, she gains a massive power boost. In her base form, she's pretty weak. Her main thing is being proficient at magic. Proficient, not strong. But when she gets angry, she gets a ridiculous boost and becomes an absolute unit to deal with. She can throw up to 5 tons around at high speed and create shields strong enough to hold up an entire rich person building. So I guess like a mansion. This has its limits as she falls unconscious afterward and starts babbling in the unknown language before foreshadowing to a massive plot point. So she doesn't do too much in this form. And growing up in an almost completely royal environment, she almost never gets angry due to it having been beaten out of her, metaphorically and physically. She is almost incapable of giving in to anger. The problem is whether this is too confusing, why it happens, that makes it seem weird. Okay, so that is the question. And to start, of course, knowing more about this, I have to say this every time, knowing more about the story and about the character and about the plot and the goals of the character and the world that they're in would definitely inform answering this question. But I think that the answer to this, I'm going to say, okay, so my tentative answer to the actual question, which is this too confusing? Why it happens that it makes it seem weird? So I guess the way they're saying it, is this or the way I'm going to interpret the question, is this a weird effect? And is the reason why it happens too confusing? So what I'm getting from this character is it's kind of like magical Hulk. And there's a lot of little elements here. And I think that the key to making this flow logically would be connecting these elements that maybe seem a little bit slightly disparate, a little bit different, maybe not super related, but they're not wholly, totally unrelated. So the key element is that this character has shadows fused to their soul. So the first place that I would look to kind of find the logic to make this fit into the world so that when it is explained, like I don't have a problem with the audience not knowing why, or at least not knowing how. I mean, I guess if you had a scene and it's like one of their friends is being threatened or anything like that, and then that's when you see her go Hulk form, basically magical Hulk form, then obviously the character would connect threat to her loved ones to that type of power coming out. Now, as to the why it happens, I don't have a problem initially with the audience not knowing, because it adds to some mystery. It gives you something to unfold as the story goes on, but you definitely need to know why it happens. And I do believe that there needs to be clear connections. So the first place that I would look would be this attribute of shadows being fused to her soul. I would start detailing in there, really start to work that out. Number one, how did that happen? Do the where, what, when, where, why. I said where twice. Who, what, when, where, why, how of that. All of those might not be necessary, but why did this happen? How did this happen? Even what is the process of something like this happening? Now, this may or may not have any ramifications in your story itself. It may never really be deeply explained necessarily, but for you to know the logic around this, I think would be very helpful for you to really make it tightly fit. So how did this happen? Was it a ritual that her parents did? Was it like a Naruto type of thing? And then also in that same thing, what is the quality and the nature of shadow in your world? Are we just talking about regular run-of-the-mill shadows because of light being cast, basically? Or is there a quality to the type of shadow that can be bound to one's soul in your world? Is it an evil thing? Is it not an evil thing? Is it just kind of like, what is the word for not evil and not good? Just kind of, I can't think of the word, but you know it. Put it in the comments what that word is. I know the word and I can't think of it right now. But is it a sentient type of shadow? Is it a demonic type of shadow? Because obviously in a lot of world cultures, a lot of religious systems, darkness and shadow are typically equated to things that are evil, things that are the opposite of good, right? Light is good, shadow is evil. That might not be the case in your world. It doesn't have to be the case, but understanding the nature and quality, and also just even the, I guess, abilities that are imparted by shadow in your world will be very necessary, so that it makes sense that she would at some point have these qualities or express these qualities when she's going Hulk form. Now, typically what I would think is that shadow as an attribute is not necessarily one that I would, and I think a lot of people would, connect to an increase in strength. So I would say what is it about the shadow in your world that directly influences strength, that has, influence over the attribute of strength? Now, if that's not where it's coming from, and if shadow being fused to her, so for example, something that I was thinking, this is probably very cliche, it's very easy, low-hanging fruit, but if the quality and nature of the type of shadow that has been infused to her soul is perhaps demonic in nature, perhaps the type of shadow demon that has been attached to her is like a behemoth of some shadow realm. So maybe shadow is a realm that has a variety of different beings that have different attributes. So if one of those beings is bound or fused to the soul of a human or whatever type of creature your character is, it begins to impart those characteristics, right? So perhaps a shadow behemoth or whatever was infused to her soul. And so she gets the characteristics of that behemoth, which would be strength and everything that was described here. So that would be the first place that I would look. Now, if shadow being fused to her soul is something completely different and connected to another plot point altogether, and the strength actually comes from something else about her magic. So the poster says her main thing is being proficient at magic, but not strong. So I'm assuming that when you say not strong, perhaps that relates to what we would think of as a mana pool or a pool of energy that one can draw from in order to do magic. Kind of what we see in RPGs or even magical animes or whatever the case may be. That's a very normal sort of world logic, is that there is, for magic users, energy that is pulled from in order for the person to do magic. So perhaps it not being strong for her is from the the thing about her, I couldn't think of the word, that I had to stop, the words were gone. Something about her not being able to access that energy, not being able to carry that much energy within her. So perhaps she has a lot of head knowledge about how to do magic. And if she had a greater pool of magic or energy or mana or whatever it is in your world to work with, then she would be great at it. She would be stronger at it. Because otherwise, I'm not quite sure how she could be proficient and not strong, other than that she has the knowledge, but she just doesn't have the, energy pool in order to do that. So if it's connected to that, what I would say then, where I would look there, is what type of magic is she proficient in? Is she proficient in magic that is either directly connected to strength and shield and that physical type of stuff, or is she proficient in magics that perhaps secondarily affect those attributes, and perhaps in ways that are surprising? I don't know what within your world that would be, if strength was a secondary attribute to whatever her primary proficiency in magic is. That would logically make sense, that if her boost in strength connected to her anger is originating from, girl, where are my words? Originating from her magic use, then I would probably say it'd be a good idea to have them somehow connected to that being the way her magic manifests. Now, another option, another point in her character that you have is, okay, so we have a couple of other little elements. She starts speaking in unknown tongues. Now that could be connected to the shadows, which that's probably where I would make that connection, is the shadows being fused to her soul, and perhaps the shadows being sentient in some way, or beings of on its own, or whatever. The other option is perhaps this could connect to the fact that she grew up in a royal environment. Now, you don't specifically state whether she is royalty. It would make sense if she was somehow connected by blood in some way to the royal family. So perhaps that can be where the strength comes in. And perhaps that would be why it would be beaten out of her. If the royalty is not actually part of her character backstory, since she's in a royal environment, you don't specify if she's like a maid. I don't think that she would necessarily be a maid. She could be from a family line of mages, warriors, protectors, maybe like guardians of the royal family whose abilities did kind of manifest. Or perhaps she's from a people group within your world that has been basically pressed into servitude to the royal family, to the most powerful ethnic or national group in the world right now. And perhaps that the people group that she comes from, perhaps part of their characteristics is that they were very warlike, strong, barbaric almost. Perhaps they were seen as, intellectually inferior. Maybe she's a mix, maybe she's a mix of, whatever people group the royal family is from and whatever people group has been pressed into service. So she has that combination of the magic of a royal, but not strong. She's good at it, head knowledge, but she's not strong at it because the other, I'll say barbaric. I'm not saying that in a negative way, but just whatever, bear with me. The barbarians being more strength, being that kind of berserker type of thing. This is very RPG, very, not extremely original, but whatever. It'll be recognizable to the audience, right? So the mix makes it so that she can't fully access either one 100%. But that could be very interesting because then as you develop her character down the line, seeing how she cleverly uses those two could be very cool. So that would be the third option. Is it the strength somehow comes from her lineage, her biological lineage, whether that is something within the royal family, something within a family line that has served the royal family as guardians or whatever, or if that's just coming from a people group that's been basically suppressed. Maybe there were wars between these two groups. The dominant people group won against the barbarians and pressed them into service. And so now that people group has intermingled with, the dominant group, and basically they are expected to be in certain roles, right? And perhaps the parent, you mentioned it being beaten out of her, perhaps the parent that is not barbarian, or maybe even the one that is barbarian, quote unquote, beat it out of her in order to make it so that she can rise in the ranks or be useful or not be seen as a threat or whatever you want to set up for that. So I think that in order to keep it from being confusing or weird for the audience, it would be that you would tie it into one of these attributes that you've laid out in your question for this character. Make it make sense. Really kind of start to work through each of these areas so that when you do explain it, it makes sense to the audience within the logic of your world. So either it's connected to the shadows, and why would being connected to the shadows give her the ability to access crazy strength and all that kind of stuff, or it's connected to the magic that she has. And perhaps I forgot to say this, if it is connected to the magic that she has, perhaps the emotional attachment to whoever is being hurt or threatened, allows her to break through whatever blockages she may have and access temporarily that greater, stronger pool of magic in order to be able to now do, the crazy stuff that you were mentioning in your question, or it has to do with her bloodline, her family lineage. Now, the thing about it is you have these three very different places that it can come from. And is it possible that giving her all of these things may be too much, in the sense of it starts to make her, I don't even know, how would I describe how this would make her character come off to the audience? It's just like too many different things going on with this character at once, potentially, unless you give it a closer tie, you give some of these things a closer tie. So for example, here's how it could flow. The shadow being fused to her soul perhaps is a ritual among the barbarians. If we do the tack of the direction of she's a mix between the dominant group and the barbarian group, right? So we'll say the humans and the barbarians, just to make it easy. Humans and the orcs or whatever. We'll just call them barbarians. And within one of those people groups, it's a ritual among magic users or whatever. Maybe not, whatever. Maybe in the we'll just go with the barbarians. In the barbarian group, it's a ritual that they bind an element to their babies, or maybe within a certain segment of society, they bind an element to their babies. So shadow, light, fire, water, air, earth, I don't know, whatever elements would be, metaphysical elements would be present in your world, right? Or whatever one perhaps there's an affinity to, or maybe within that people group, each family, there's clans or whatever that ascribe to a particular element, and she is from the shadow tribe or whatever. So everybody from the shadow tribe has that bound to their soul at a certain age. And so that connects to her lineage, why she would have that shadow binding. And then the other half of her being a magic user who is in a royal environment, because generations down the line, now her family works as guards of the royal family, which can have some really fun little possibilities for like romance, whatever, whatever. I'm just saying. But, sorry. So whoever she guards, being in this royal environment, she also learns magic a little bit. So if you connect these different things, I just kind of like let that point go. I was like, I'm not going to go any deeper in that because I feel like this video is already getting too long. But if you make sure that there are clear connections between these very different, they're not very different, but these different aspects of her character, her backstory, her abilities, her skills, then it won't be weird. I don't think you have, or at least you have a better chance of the audience not seeing it as weird or confusing or like, where did that even come from? So that would be my answer. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Okay. Because as we know, I could talk forever. I've already been recording for like 30 minutes and a good chunk of that was just my intro. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me. How would you answer this question? What do you think about my, I guess, solution? I don't know if I really provided solutions, but just places to look, because we don't have a lot about the story, the goals of the character, what we're doing in the story. Those would all also factor in probably potentially very heavily, especially the poster mentioned it foreshadowing, speaking in tongues, foreshadowing to some plot point. So all of that factors into how you would go about making these things not seem weird. I hope that this was helpful to you. If you have such a thing where you have a character that has a bunch of different aspects and you want to make sure that things that you're having them do aren't weird, just make sure that it connects logically to some aspect of the character that you've set up. I think that's kind of like the nutshell of it, the nutshell takeaway of it. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. Have a great rest of your day. I hope to see you here again soon. I hope to speak to you here again soon. I hope to join you on a drive or on a walk, or as you're doing your laundry and vacuuming your house and doing your dishes and doing your meal prep, or at the gym. You know, let's all get out there. New year, new you know what I'm saying? But anyway, thank you so much for joining me. And I'll catch you next time.